Workers.
Workers? Guys in hard hats? All right. Teachers? All right. You're not. We'll get to that. So that's good, right? So there's kind of the preconceived notion of labor is really only guys, swinging a sledgehammer or pushing a bulldozer, or they're teachers, within their classroom. That's a pretty good example of the breadth of diversity of labor. But really, a lot of times what folks will say is all these labor goons are coming in, and there are these outside special interests. Well, again, there's over 1 million of us in this state. So we live in every community. We're in almost every type of profession and industry. So we're not an outside special interest. We're literally inside. We're in your classroom. We're in your community. We're in your church. We're in your synagogue on that one. And again, it's really just a worker group. It's a group of workers that have banded together and said, we're going to stand with each other and try and better each other's lives, and by that then our community, and by that then our state, and by that then our country. So it's not an outside special interest. It's about as inside as you can get, because there's members of it in this room now, and probably every room that you walk into, certainly in Illinois. They used to be effective, right? Back in the heyday, in the 50s, over a third of private sector workers were unionized. Now we're down into like the low teens, single percentages depending on the state. So they're not really effective, they're kind of obsolete, right? I would actually argue the exact opposite of that, in that as we've moved out of the typical industrialized type of workforce that we have here, an economy, and more into a service-based one, we've seen a lot of the benefits of what an organized workforce provides through fair wages, equal wages for men and women doing the same job, a secure retirement, good health care, maybe scholarships for you and your kids, and frankly just the idea of another type of community within our society, right? We've all read Bowling Alone or heard of it, right? Where we used to have all these bowling leagues and now they've kind of petered out. And what has that done to the overall ability for us to engage with other people in our community of different persuasions, different backgrounds, and what that's done to kind of weaken the ties within communities. Labor does that. Labor brings black, brown, women, female, or women, men, transgender, gay, straight, old, young, doesn't matter, into a central bargaining unit, right? So in a way, it really is one of the most effective ways to bring issues of economics, of equality, of righteousness to a forefront in ways that really, I think now more than ever is needed. Right? We've seen all the discussion about inequality. We've seen wage stagnation. All of that is almost perfectly tracked along as labor has actually shrunk as a share of the workforce, becoming larger and larger issues within our society. It can be tracked pretty closely to labor's smaller percentage of the overall workforce. And the big misnomer in that is it isn't like a lot of people are not members of labor anymore. There's over 16 million, and again, if you throw in unaffiliated, a couple million more than that, nationwide. It's just that our overall economy has also grown as well. And in the sectors that they used to be in, and certainly in some of the states that have gone right to work, labor as a percentage of the overall economy has shrunk, but as a just straight up number of union members, it's actually been fairly steady over the last couple of years, a couple of decades. They're quickly shrinking. That's not really true. Again, they've been fairly steady. What we have seen, though, is attacks on the ability of labor to organize, right to work, which I think is, I hate even using that phrase because I think it's adopting the phrase of our opponents. Basically, anti-union laws have now, just in the last year even, taken over a majority of states where we have the ability now for opponents of labor to make it that much harder for labor to organize and to maintain unions that are already there. In Iowa, we saw it, where now every year in Iowa, labor unions are going to have to recertify that they're even a unit, even a bargaining unit, whereas before it used to be to the overall term of their contract or agreement with the state. So that's a really big change. Again, within the Midwest, Missouri and Kentucky, just after the 2016 elections, went right to work. And that was after the Republicans took control of the state legislatures. So we are seeing it harder for unions to organize and to kind of operate. And we're now going to see probably at the federal level the Janus decision, which was brought to us by our wonderful governor, Bruce Rauner, which is basically going to bring right to work to public sector unions, where there has actually been a really large increase in unionization, and those again are your teachers, SEIU at municipal levels, AFSCME at your state levels, UAW at universities, you name it. They're basically going to say that there's going to be a decision given down by the Supreme Court, especially now that the Republicans stole a Senate or a Supreme Court seat there, to say that a way that bargaining units are able to operate is going to be obsolete. It's going to be much harder for public sector unions to operate in that way in public sector workforces. So that's going to be a big challenge coming forward as well. But actually in Illinois, we've seen unionization rates grow over the last couple of years, despite what our governor's most recent TV ads are trying to tell you. That's not true. We've actually seen unionization grow in Illinois, and that's because of some of the really aggressive organizing that some of our locals are doing. Another one too is if you bring a union in, that means there's just going to be a lot more conflict in the workplace. I would actually argue, and studies show, that's the exact opposite. When you bring a union in, they set a bargaining parameter onto dealing with workplace issues. They have a grievance process. If you think you're being shorted hours or if you're not getting the right pay rate, before you probably would have just stewed and maybe stormed into your boss's office and said, what gives, you know? But now you have a representative that you can go to and they track these things and they can bring the full weight of the union to force management, to force the top dogs of the company or of the workplace to the table and actually talk this through. So what that brings is conflict down a notch or a couple to say that no, there's actually a process by which we go through this. There's steps within our contract that requires us to elevate things if we aren't coming to an agreement. When a contract comes time for renewal, there's a whole contract negotiation process. So really it actually de-escalates a lot of conflict in a workplace, and it really frankly feels for an individual to have an ability to have a much larger voice than themselves. If they feel that they are being wronged or something's not right, or if there's an unsafe workplace, what have you, if there's sexual harassment in the workplace, they can go to their union. That union then can bring their lawyers and their expertise in maintaining that contract and enforcing that contract to the table on it. So actually it reduces conflict. Unions are only there to serve the Democratic Party. As a partisan Democrat, I wish that were true. Unions are nonpartisan. We have, again, everybody from the most hard right to the most far left within a bargaining unit. Lately, have we been skewing a little bit more Democratic? Yes, and that's because of people like Bruce Rauner, who comes in and forces previously pro-labor Republicans to now be afraid of voting their district and their constituency, and so they're starting to now vote against, again, their constituents and their longstanding ties to labor. So in Illinois, we actually, in the last couple of years, primarily under Governor Rauner, have seen a shift of labor being much more aligned with the Democratic Party. But I will say, talk to Sam McCann. Sam McCann is a state senator, pro-life, pro-gun, kind of rock rib Republican, but he's from the Springfield area down into Jacksonville, so kind of southwestern Illinois. He represents a heavily labor district, and the governor tried to take him out. In 2016, spent over $3 million trying to take Sam McCann out. And who did Sam McCann, again as a rock rib Republican, go to? But he went to labor, and labor threw in millions of dollars and ground troops to protect him because he was voting in labor's interests, in his constituents' interest on that. So we, by no means, find any benefit in being completely aligned with one party. Our membership is not completely aligned with one party. Even my local, which is overwhelmingly, it's majority female, majority minority, especially up in the Chicagoland area, we have fully a third of our members Republicans, partisan, votes in primary Republicans. And so are we really representing them if we're only giving our money over to Democrats? We're not. So no, if you are a labor-friendly elected official, you will get labor support on that end. Nationally, we have seen, again, kind of a change coming in that end, but there's a reason that at least right to work bill has not been successful, even though we have total Republican control, because you have folks like Rob Portman, senator out of Ohio, who in his last election in 2016 actually got dozens of labor unions to endorse him. And so he still kind of maintains some of the vestiges of the former Republican Party that wasn't really hostile to labor. What I would say, too, is you're also seeing in the Republican Party business interests taking more and more of a control of their process, of their funding, and of their decision-making. So you are starting to see the Republican Party kind of take on more of an anti-labor approach, but that's not across the board, and certainly in Illinois we have still quite a few labor-friendly Republicans here. That said, Bruce Rauner is not. He is pretty much the only consistent thing with Bruce Rauner is that he hates labor. And he's trying to come at us in every shape, way, and form. Immediately upon his election, tried to push right-to-work legislation at the local level. I don't know how many of you may have been involved in that, but literally went to city halls, into counties, into townships, saying, hey,